Hello and welcome to my presentation on what is a method. According to our book that we're using for this class, they have a pretty good definition of it that allows you to modularize an app by separating a task into self-contained units. Pretty good description of what a method is. It allows you to take code, put it into its own little unit or box, and be able to call it from anywhere. It helps with reusability and also cleanup of code so that you're not duplicating code in multiple areas. Method kind of really has a couple of different components. The first of those components is really the method header, which is kind of your signature string that you put at the top to define what the header, the information about the header and what it's going to take as parameters. Then the other piece is really the method body. This is the chunk of code that you're going to run within that method and either return a value or not from the method. The method header contains a couple of different sections, number of different sections actually. The first one is your modifiers. So if you look at where I have public, you can have public or private. This determines the accessibility, so it's the access modifier of the method. If it's public, it'll be accessible outside of the class. If it's private, it's only internal to the class. The other one is an optional modifier, which can be static or non-static. We will discuss that a little bit later here on the next few slides. Your next option is your return type. So in this option, it's a bool, which is going to return a true false. You can return whatever type you want, like integer or string, or you can also return a void, which means there is no return from this method and that you're just running some code without bringing back any kind of a return. The next option is your method name. This can be anything you really want it to be. There are some standards within programming that people follow sometimes, but usually it's just whatever you want the method name to be called, but make it something that people will understand, and that if other programmers need to call it, they'd know and it makes sense. The last section is your arguments. This can be many, this can be none, it can be one, but you have to have your arguments, which is a variable of what the argument name is, and then the type of argument. So in this case, it's an integer. A couple of different options with different method types is we have the difference between what are called static methods and non-static methods. If we look at the basics of what the difference is between a static and a non-static, is on the left-hand side, you can see here that we will have a static method within our even-odd class, and it's a public static bool is even int number. What this means is that I can call this method directly without having to create an instance of the class. So if you look a lot of things within the C# framework, like math is another one that has a lot of static methods. You can do math dot square root or different functions, and you don't have to create an actual instance of that class. On the other hand, non-static, if we look at the class over here that's called on the right, that's even, odd, non, before I can access a non-static method in there, I have to create an instance of that class, which here is defined as even, and then that public bool is even method is accessible. The code to do this then is where I need to instantiate an instance of that and then call the isEven method off of that instantiated object. So in this example, you'll see E has been created, and then I can do e.isEven to make sure I call that method. Another method type that we have are overloaded methods. And when I say overloaded, it doesn't mean like the van here where we're overloaded with too much work to do. It gives us the ability to have a method with the same name but various different parameters to it. We look at an example here. We have some employee information, and let's pretend that we have a really horrible HR system that allows us to have multiple duplicate IDs for people, which again would be a horrible scenario, but just work with me on this one. So here we have 3 different employees, 2 of which have the same ID and also were hired on the same date. So it would be difficult for us to be able to find them, so we need multiple different options. If I was building a class to be able to find employees, what I'd want to be able to do is have multiple methods for being able to do that. So here you'll see an example. I create first a public method that returns a string find employee, so return maybe the employee name or some employee information, and it passes in the employee ID. But knowing that I have duplicates, I would have an issue with being able to find just one. So let's say I want to add another find employee method and do it by employee ID and hire date. Again, I had 2 people on the same hire date, so we'll add a third option and say I can do this find employee by employee ID, their hire date, their first name, or their last name. Notice here when we're looking at this, the first part of it in the methods header, the method header, this is identical. So we're calling it's a public method with returns a string and has the name of find employee. What we do that's different then is that we have over here different parameter types. And this allows for what's called overloading of a method. So instead of having to say find employee by employee ID, find employee by employee ID and hire date, find employee by employee ID, hire date, and first name, last name, as the method name, I can continue to use the same method of find employee and pass in the different parameters based on what I'm looking for. So this still has to be different. So if you're looking at something like you can't have int employee ID and int employee some other number and it still be different. They have to be varied by their type, their variable name, and their type as well. So in conclusion, what we're really looking at is methods help us with what's a commonly referred to term in programming as code smell. And code smell refers to bad code. What we're looking to try and accomplish is keep ourselves away from bad code where we're maybe taking this is even and say we have to check numbers throughout our program of whether they're odd or even numbers. And if we don't put this into a method, we could reuse the same code over and over and over again, and it have in different places. Many problems with this. One, it does creates bad code. Two, it also allows you if you have to make a change to it, you have to change that in every location. Here, if you make a change inside of the method, that change is reflected throughout the entire program. Now remember that can be an advantage or a disadvantage. The advantage is you change it in one place, it affects everything. The disadvantage is you change it in one place and it affects everything. So realize when you make that change, you have to understand where the effects are going to happen and make sure that it's not going to break certain things within your code. So that's where it makes it easy to do or positive to make sure that a method really has one specific use and not multiple uses that you could change the functionality of it based on where it's being called. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and I hope you learned a little something about methods. Thanks and have a great day.